Hey guys, welcome back to another reaction video. This time we're looking at what John Lovell of the Warrior Poet Society, another YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers, has to say about planning for uncertain times, making plans. And he breaks it down into 4 different plans: primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency plans for when things get hairy. Yes, he's a prepper sort. You would classify him that way. Praise be to God. He takes his role as father, as husband seriously, his vocation as a provider and a protector seriously, because he is a procreator. And since he has taken that procreator role seriously, that vocation seriously, he's taking the other one seriously as well. So men, listen up. You have a responsibility to care for those in your vocational circles. Even if you're not a father or a husband yet, you still, all of us as citizens, have a responsibility to serve others by taking care of those within our circles, our family, our friends, that kind of thing, being ready, being prepared. So that's a good thing. We can talk more about that later. But what John has to say here is he's talking about forming a community, church, and then also what happens if you live in an unfree state, California. Well, guess what? I'm a pastor with a community, a church in an unfree state. And so I found this to be very interesting. And that's what I want to look at right now. Let's take a look at this video and react to it.
And we're back. I had mentioned political advocacy. The next thing I would say in your primary plan is community integration. I think people in their preparation minds, they get too gear, gun, food centric, and they really miss this piece. And it might be one of the most important pieces. So really hear me on this. Part of your primary plan in times of such dire straits should be community integration. That means you should know who your neighbors are. Make friends with.
Okay, so in times of dire stress and things like, thinking about the upcoming Civil War, we hear that talk all the time. A coming World War III, we hear that kind of talk all the time. We know of, in 2020, the summer riots, the BLM riots, the race riots. See the Tim Walz video that I did before. Tim Walz was the governor over Minnesota during those and helped burn down Minneapolis. Things like that. COVID, pandemics, things like this, things when they get hairy and get out of control. So community integration, get to know your neighbors. No, it's not just about guns and gear and food supplies and stuff like that. It's about relationships like that. That's good.
With people in your local school or your local co-op. Hang out with people at your church. Become integrated with other people. If things go sideways, you and your wife against the world isn't going to work very long. It'll work for a little while, and then it will not work for a long while. And so you really need very good, trusted relationships integrated in hardcore. Now, under community integration, it's not just playing nice with the people around you and building a community. I would also add under that, getting to know your city councilors, your local sheriff, police and EMS in your neighborhood. It's going to be a lot harder for your local government to come down with an iron fist on you because of all the handed down tyrannical policies that are happening and are going to be happening far more en masse if you're actually known to these people. Yeah, I would love to be.
All right. So yeah, that's a really good point. During COVID, after the initial 2-week stand down, stop COVID for 2 weeks, and it was around Easter, if you recall, we decided to open the church back up. I went to the elders, I went to the council and said, hey, we got to get back to the church. This is not right. We shouldn't be shutting down the church. And what else did I do? I did not want to be an outlaw. That is not our intent, to rebel. And I wanted to have a good witness before the world, those who might not be Christian. And so I called the chief of police. We were on good terms. I didn't know him personally, but he knew me. We knew of each other. We live in a town of 1,300 people. And so, yeah, he was like, yes, I support you, all this kind of stuff. It's important that, we don't breach your rights and stuff like that. He said, but make sure we're doing this by the book. I also called our county supervisor for our district. And he said, if your chief there in Ferndale won't make it happen, if he balks, which he didn't, let me know. We'll find somewhere in this county where you can get off the beaten path and you can host a church service. So during that time, kudos to these men. But what he's saying here is absolutely right. Real relationships matter at the local level. And this is why all politics are local politics, because whoever makes a decree, Gavin Newsom, whatever, the president of the United States says you can't be doing this at the local level, who's going to stop us? Right? So if you know the people and you have good relationship with them and you're doing, as Christians, you're doing the right things and you're trying to be a good citizen, you're not going to have a problem more times than not. So really good wisdom there.
On a first name basis with whatever law enforcement is going to be enforcing whatever tyranny is, because what can happen is if you are known to your local sheriff's department and EMS and all this stuff, and you've built relationships with them, then it's going to be far more difficult for them to enforce tyrannical laws against you. What can happen is you can make in your own little area, this is going to work very well in rural America. It's not going to work at all in urban America, but in rural America, you know your sheriff's department, they can thumb their nose at federal government asking them to pass down anti-constitutional laws. And you, in your own little microcosm, if they won't enforce it, then it's not going to happen in your local area. I noticed this during the COVID lockdowns. I lived in a more ruralish area, still neighborhoods and still a downtown area, but because we're here in Georgia, the enforcement wasn't happening very much. And so only in a few little places for a very short amount of time. And what happened is I didn't lose 2 years of my life like a lot of people did in urban areas. You cops out there, will you commit to follow the Constitution even when your bosses don't? All of you are going to have to answer that question, not just in word, but mostly in deed. Tyrants can make whatever laws they want, but ultimately they are successful if you enforce their tyranny.
This is the doctrine of the lesser magistrates. Magdeburg Confession, absolutely. The lesser magistrate has a responsibility actually to resist tyrannical, contrary to God's word, laws and decrees. And we appeal to these lesser magistrates to say, like he just said there, will you defy them when they say something that is, or command something that is contrary to God's word? You need to. This is your duty, as your vocation as a lesser magistrate in the government. So kudos to him. This is still good quality Christian stuff. I don't know if I said this before, but John Lovell, starting off as a gun tuber and then moving on to political commentary. I've also seen he does videos where he preaches sometimes. So I know I don't have 100% complete agreement with his American evangelical type of Christianity, but I agree with a lot of the things he has to say regarding how our walk with Christ is carried out in the world with our neighbor. He understands vocation. He may not use that language like we Lutherans do. He understands vocation very well. He understands government, and he's very patriotic, and he understands his role in the civil realm very well. A lot of good things to say. And so take a grain of salt with everything else he says. If you're going to follow up and see more about his channel, the Warrior Poet Society channel, I'm not endorsing any of his theology as he preaches it in his sermons, but I am definitely on the same page in these external matters and in the civil realm stuff and what we're hearing here with some of the planning and the preparation for what may be coming. He's a military man. He has a lot more experience in this kind of stuff than I do, and I find it very well. He also echoes a lot of the stuff that I grew up with my father teaching me this, my brother and I, and this sort of stuff. So yeah, good stuff.
Do it. All right, so we're still in our primary plan. I mentioned political advocacy and community integration. Next thing is, let's say you live in a state that's certainly not a free state, or you live in a highly urbanized area and you're like, this isn't going to go well. It's not going well now. Well, I would ask you to consider moving, and that's painful. And so you're going to have 100.
Yeah, it is. That's very painful to get people to move. That's a big ask. It's funny, though, because historically for the church, at least within Lutheranism, we ended up confessional Lutherans, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the quintessential, the premier confessional, faithful, conservative, traditional Lutheran church in America came here because of the Prussian Union. And we were being forced by tyrannical leadership, we'd use this language today, a government leadership that was telling us we had to raise our children under a Calvinist preacher, if that was the area of the country we lived in Germany. And so we said, no, we're not going to do that. And so everyone got together and moved to Missouri. They left Germany and they came here and they landed in Missouri where, that's where they were aiming for. And they set up shop. In the old days, you did that. We can't even move now to find a faithful church, which, by the way, if you want to come to Ferndale, this is a great opportunity to plug moving to Ferndale. Yes, it's not a free state. California is not a free state, but we are in a town of 1,300 people with more cows around us, more cow land than anything, with great natural resources and great freedoms. And as I just said, our local people aren't going to hand down tyrannical law. They actually want to, they say they want to, and they've proven themselves so far, uphold the Constitution, even when Governor Newsom says we shouldn't. So that's a good thing. You should move to Ferndale. I really think so.
101 reasons why that's very difficult or downright impossible. But I would ask you to be smart and in your primary plan, recognizing you're on borrowed time, on borrowed terrain there, and you're really going to have to get out of there. And so make a plan. A lot of people have been emptying out of major cities. A lot of areas of major cities are vacant. The big cities are failing.
Hey, John, let me query that, though. Let's say that you actually have a pretty good community. Would you choose the really decent community that you found in a less than ideal state, or would you move the state even though you had community?
Man, I'm going to rank a local community extremely high. So if you've got a really good, healthy, vibrant community built up, and you're not... if you got a really good community, but you're in a city, in a state that's not free, you got to get out of Dodge. But let's say you're far more rural in a non-free state, but that community is super strong.
Would you give pause on that?
I'd give pause on that. I'm going to take it on a case-by-case basis there.
That is what when I heard him saying this was very encouraging for me because, as a pastor, I'm called to Ferndale. I don't have the liberty to leave the state. So this worries me as I start to plan for my family, start to prepare, and I'm worried about, okay, I already know as a gun guy, I know I don't live in a free state. I can't have certain guns that the rest of you guys can all have. I can't do certain things the rest of you guys can all do. But I have a great, vibrant church community of like-minded, unified Christians who don't want to serve a tyrannical government, who want to serve God and love their neighbors and serve others more than themselves, who would and have bound together during COVID in times of need and even in non-crisis situations, just swapping vegetables and what we grew in our garden and what they grow in their garden, and just like, taking care of each other when an earthquake happens and we see that people are in need, the way that we get our resources and we share them with each other, stuff like that. We have a vibrant community of men and women and children of all ages. And we're in a rural part of this non-free state. And so this wisdom, to hear this guy who gives as much thought on a regular basis say, the hierarchy, it's that local community that comes first. If you have several of them stacked against you, so you're in an urban area, in a non-free state, but you have a valuable, vibrant community, you still got two against the one. But if you're in a rural area, with a vibrant community, even though you may be in a non-free state, you don't need to pack up and leave Dodge. You can batten down the hatches and hold your own and serve each other, because you can't just go on, as he said, with building that community. It's not just going to be you and your wife or you and your pal making it through. This isn't going to be a Mad Max situation. Guys often talk about, growing up with my brother, my dad, others around us in Wyoming, growing up talking about the potential for natural disasters, Y2K, stuff like this. When I was a kid, one of the things that comes to mind that we think about is that we oftentimes project out the worst case scenario is going to be like a Mad Max situation. It's going to be a post-apocalyptic situation. Well, it's going to be like 10% Mad Max and about 90% Little House on the Prairie. That's the reality, guys. If things go south, you're still going to have community. You're still going to have need for an economy, whether that's bartering, whatever that is. You're still going to have need for worship and church and functioning as a society. We know this from looking through human history. Everything just doesn't fall apart like that because we are integrated with each other and we need each other. No one is independent. We are all dependent people. And so if you're thinking about World War III or the Civil War that might be coming, or just, riots in 2024 in November because of an election, don't think it's just you versus the world or you and your wife against the world. You need a community. And that's exactly what he's saying. And I would add that community, as he touched on church, that is the most important community. I tell this to people already who call into the church looking for a handout. First question I ask people when they're calling in, you get these panhandlers or these guys working the churches. They just kind of network around the churches trying to look for handouts. First question I ask them, Do you have a church? Can I call your pastor? I'd be happy to call your pastor on your behalf. Let him know you're hurting. Let him know you're in need. Oh, no, I don't have a church. Well, why not? You see, this is one of the blessings of being part of a church is that you're in a network. You have a family of people who care for you so that when you are going through hard times, there is a built-in family, a support network of people who want to care for you. And you don't have to try to convince them. They know you. They love you. They've been around you. And oftentimes, the guy who's trying to milk the system there and try to take advantage of the charity and the grace of the church, yeah, no, that's okay. And they bail. They just want the handout. But when you actually offer to help solve the problem by connecting them with their people, they don't have people. They've bailed on people. They've tried to live this life on their own terms, their own way, independently from everybody else. That's not reality. And so then what I normally do is say, hey, and this is true, we don't have a lot of extra money to be given out to those who need it. And we reserve our benevolent fund for our own people first and foremost. And so, hey, I don't have a lot of silver and gold to give you, but I can pray for you, just like we see Peter and John do. Now, I can't give you money, but I can give you something more valuable. Let me pray for you. And they totally bail. They don't want that.
Because we need pockets of resistance everywhere, right?
Yeah.
The last piece, I would say.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I cut that off a little bit early. So he says one of the reasons to give pause on this is needing pockets of resistance. And we can take this not just to mean political or civil discourse or disruption, but theologically too. This is why here in Ferndale, I've mentioned this before. I mentioned it at the last conference we had last year. We don't want to move. There's a lot of people who are exiting California. And to be honest, there's that temptation. There's a lot of people who want and they dream of leaving and going to a free state. But this is where we're at. This is where God, for me, has called me. I'm a pastor here by divine call. I have no right to be looking at leaving. I'm not doing that. That's not the goal. But even for the laity, their families are here. They've put down roots here. They have connections here. And the whole world is saying, oh, you should be thinking about leaving California and go somewhere free. Why? We need theological cells of, these little centers of disruptive forces. What we mean by that is we need theological centers of faithfulness. These pockets of resistance against the wayward, sea beast of false government and the wayward earth beast of man-made religion. We need faithful cells, pockets of resistance all over the world. If everyone from Ferndale exited California, well, then there would be no more gospel in Ferndale. The lost here would be completely abandoned and lost. And so until the Lord shuts down our doors, it is a great honor to serve and to sacrifice and to be in this, to be behind enemy territory, to be in this occupied area, to be in the People's Republic of California, Communist Republic of California. So anyway, that's all I wanted to do. I want to react to this. I think it's a great idea. I think for Christians, especially those I serve out in this area and those who you may be watching this from around California, if you do live in the city and you want to get out, if you can, if you're not a pastor called there or I don't know, that kind of situation. If you are looking to move, I'm not encouraging you to move to anywhere but Ferndale because we would love to have you here, obviously. But consider how the first thing you should be doing is being engaged in your church. Whether it's in a crisis situation or not, your membership matters. You're being connected to that family of faith right there where God has placed you matters. And if you prayerfully discern that it's time to get out of Dodge, you need to be looking at where you can go to plug into another faithful congregation, to another branch of a faithful church. The LCMS, we have churches everywhere. So if you're not moving to Ferndale, like you should, like I want you to, then you should be moving somewhere else where you know there's a faithful church. That should be the first thing that drives your decision making. Where can I move? If I'm moving, is there a faithful church there? Where can I go where there's a faithful church? If there's not a faithful church and I don't have the energy to plant one, why would I go there? If I don't have the means to plant one, why would I go there if there's not one there? I'm only going to be looking at moving places where there is already a church or if I have the means as an evangelist, as a missionary, to plant one, because it matters that much that I receive the means of grace on a regular basis, because this is what keeps me receiving Christ's body and blood at the altar. It's what keeps me hearing his gospel when the devil convinces me that I am an unworthy sinner and that I am damned. I need to be connected to God's word. It's what keeps me encouraged by other Christians as we gather together, Hebrews 10:25 style, not refusing to do so as is the habit of some. And then from there, we can start working on all of our other preparations in life. So make a plan. That's a good idea. And you can, I got a link to the rest of this video in the description below, so you can take a look at that if you want to watch the rest of this and see how he breaks down everything else. I wanted to focus on this one section. Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for watching. If you are not doing anything on Saturday, join us 9 a.m. Pacific for Truth at All Costs, the podcast where we don't pander, placate, or speak politically correct lies that aid in the devil's murderous ways, but speak the truth at all costs. So, all right, we'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks, guys, for watching.